Good morning and welcome to the latest Flexible Space Association webinar. I'm Jane Sartin, I'm the Executive Director of FlexSA. And this morning we are covering the topic of flexible workspace on the high street, which seems to be a real hot topic at the moment. And we've certainly had a large number of people registering to watch the webinar this morning. In a moment, I will ask our three panelists to introduce themselves, and then I have a series of questions. We've had quite a few questions submitted by people watching, so we've built those in as well, and I've added a few myself as well. If I can invite you on in the order in which you're sitting on my screen. So William Stokes first. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi guys, so I'm William Stokes. I'm the joint founder and CEO of CoSpace. We're a flexible operator that focuses on taking the rise of co-working and flex space from London and take it into regional locations.
Okay, thank you. And Will?
Morning, Will Kinnear, Director of HEWN, Chartered Surveyor, specialising in the flex workspace sector for the last sort of 15 years or so, advising property owners, operators on the sector, how they get involved on partnership arrangements, JVs, management agreements, profit share leases, etc.
Thank you. And Zoe?
Good morning, Zoe Ellis-Moore. Thank you very much for this opportunity today. Spaces to Places company I founded very much on the premise of bringing together research and data with marketing to really give marketing insights. So very much specialised in the flexible office sector, but giving much more than just marketing.
Okay, thank you. So as I said, I've got some questions to go through, if anyone has any other questions that they'd like to throw in, you can put these into the chat box on your screen, and we'll try and pick those up either as we're going along or at the end. I remember talking to operators a couple of years ago about the prospect of flexible workspace on the high street and being given lots of reasons why this couldn't happen. So what's changed? I think we're sort of looking at real headline thoughts at the moment, because I'm sure we're going to dive into some of the detail a bit further on. So Zoe, you can start with you on that question.
I think the simple thing to me is in the pandemic, two emerging trends have really converged. We've had the decline of the relevancy of bricks and mortar retail, and this has met with the increased demand for near-to-home working. So this convergence, the result is a revolution to the way we work, really.
Right, thank you. And William?
Yeah, I think I'd mirror that. Certainly pre-COVID, the high street was failing. I think this has been accelerated from COVID, which has enabled people to go, okay, well, we need use classes, we need change of uses for certain units. Those big kind of 6,000 to 10,000 square foot units. Who's going to take those? And it's looking at alternatives, whether that be resi or whether that actually be office space.
Right, and Will, is there anything you'd add to that?
Not really. I mean, the planning has allowed this, but that's only fairly recent. I think the ability to work from home or work from anywhere has obviously, this giant experiment of COVID has accelerated that. And a lot of companies and individuals have tried to work that in the past, but they've been held back, through various different means and reasons. But I think the ability to work near home is going to become a bigger driver, and therefore what is near home? They are high streets generally. They aren't office locations in these small towns and not even villages to an extent, and therefore the high street seems a natural place for people to work. So I think that there is a trend towards this, and I think it's only growing.
Okay, thank you. So moving on to a bit more of the detail, how do you think the change in planning use classes will impact the viability of workspaces on the high street? And perhaps if we can start with Will on this and give us a brief explanation of what those changes in use classes are.
From September last year, the government decided that they want to change the use classes really to sort of enable the repurposing of buildings on the high street. There's a new Class E now that allows for a mix of uses to reflect the changing sort of retail requirements, actually where it came from initially. And it allows a building to be used flexibly by having a number of uses within the building taking place concurrently or at different times of the day. The most important part about it is really that the changes to another use or mix of uses within Class E Now, Class E encompasses what was A, B1, D1, which is retail, office, and non-resi, which is leisure. It allows that change of use within that Class E to be done without full planning permission. I hope that gives a bit of an idea of what we're looking at. I mean, pubs and hot food takeaways and bits and pieces aren't included in that, but it is very much a retail, office, and leisure use change.
Right. Thank you. So Zoe, just looking at the question on the impact that the viability of workspaces on the high street that will bring. Have you any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think just thinking about that question, the viability is quite a key word in the question there, because yes, like we're seeing is the new players in the market, the hotels, the pubs entering as well. But my big one is looking at the statistics from instant offices. You know, you've got 6,000 different workspaces across the UK, a lot of them, most of them, about 80%, with only 1 to 2 locations. My biggest concern is all with these startups, and especially them going into sort of under 5,000 square feet and town centre locations that they're looking at. They're all great, they've got purpose and community. Sometimes they've got the government funding, but they lack that experience, commerciality and scale. And sometimes that breaks my heart because, you know, in essence, a really good business with purpose, but it's the commerciality and blending that balance of you've got to bring community and you've got to bring commerciality to make it work. And so I'm seeing viability is key. I think we're going to face a K-shaped recovery now. That's the letter that I've looked at, and my prediction is it's K-shaped recovery. What that means is you're going to have winners and losers in this market. So I think that's the thing that it all comes down to.
And William, anything further on that?
Yeah, again, I'd 100% mirror that. I think viability is absolutely key. You know, for our economics, we can't make it work below kind of 10, 12,000 square foot. That has to be the minimum size for us. I think it's looking at these units that are on the high street that are going to get turned. We've seen it on a site that Will's actually acting for us on behalf of it over in Bath, where at first the council weren't really that receptive to the change of use. Suddenly the use class changes to Class E, and suddenly they kind of get it a lot more, and they're like, okay, cool, we can do this. This is quite a viable project. So there's that element. But when you're taking these huge retail units or whatever you're taking on the high street, you've got to look at the key things such as natural light. How are you going to get natural light into the building? Because that's very key. That's a really good well. Some people want that, workforce, teams, whatever. The second one is actually looking at the viability in terms of getting good HVAC in, making sure you've got good airflow, good circulation, which I think they're the two things that will be very key when you're looking at those kind of units.
Okay, thank you. So William, do you want to tell us a bit about your workspace in Reading and why you chose that town centre location?
Yeah, so funnily enough, I chose the deal because Will talked me into it. After several times of saying you need to come and see this site, I finally caved and realised the error of my ways. That one was very key for us. Our entire focus was around towns and city centres outside of London, where we thought people were going to want to work moving forward. People are going to want a slight commute. I think they don't want to work from home, but they want to work near from home, as Zoe said. She speaks a lot about this. For us, we wanted a space that was well located. It had ready accessible parking. It had several amenities around it. You could pop out. You could get a good quality coffee, whatever you wanted. And it all came down to being in that location. We didn't want to be on a business park on the outskirts. We wanted to be in the heart of it because that's where we saw the trends of people and what requirements were moving towards.
Okay, thank you. And Will and Zoe, you're involved in a range of projects. Is there anything that you can add to sort of your experiences of this on why we're seeing this move at the moment? I mean, Will, do you want to go first?
Yeah, look, town centre locations, and it goes back to the viability question previously, actually, in my opinion, that what we're looking at here is a whole new way of working. And going back to the experiment I referred to earlier, if you are working from home, it doesn't work for everybody. It doesn't even work for the majority of people. It's a very difficult thing to do. Even if you want to do it, it's still very difficult to do. And the ability to work near home is being touted as the new way forward. But I personally believe it is the new way forward. And I think it's going to be a cohesive approach, though. You can't have individual operators or even retailers or restaurateurs, everybody else just sort of trying to say, well, actually, I'm going to plonk it here because I think this is a good idea and move down the high street. If you can get using the use classes on the new use classes, but using the councils as a good example of this, and local stakeholders to get together and produce a cohesive approach to produce this space, produce a mixed blend of retail, leisure and office, then I think there's a massive move forward. I mean, I'm working with, it came out in the press this week, L&G on a shopping centre in Cambridge, a secondary shopping centre in Cambridge, where there's a full repurposing of two of the units, or three of the units actually, into co-working and workspace. We've also done bits and pieces and deals. I've got about an operator at the moment that's an owner at the moment that's got 10 to 15 shopping centres, both shopping centres and retail parks, that they understand exactly what they're trying to achieve. They're trying to reduce the amount of retail deliberately, so there is more demand in the rest of the retail they've got in the park. So yeah, there's a huge pent up desire for this to happen, but it has to work cohesively.
Right. And Zoe, have you got experiences that you can share as examples?
Yeah, and I think looking back, a lot has been bubbling for quite a while. John Lewis, Westfield's announcements last year into converting some of their space to offices. It was 2019. We had Flora partnership with Selfridges. So lots, yeah, it takes a while to get everything off the ground there. I think what Will was talking about, Kinnear there, that we're seeing this sort of blended mixed use much more. That's key. I think a good example is 9 Yards Living in Kingston, the High Street in Kingston. And on the ground floor is co-working, but you've got co-living above. So I think that's where we're seeing everything coming together. And now much more trends towards management agreements, town centre partnerships. It's a great catalyst for all these things to actually happen and make better workspaces.
Just to add to that as well, you guys probably seeing this as well, but developers are also getting pushed to, not only just in resi schemes or student schemes, to actually put in some form of office or mixed use schemes. Councils are really pushing mixed use schemes.
Yeah, no, so it's part of a bigger picture generally on how things are changing. So how do you think that Workspace can benefit the high street, looking at it in reverse a bit? Zoe, do you want to start on that?
Yeah, definitely. Economic, social impact is huge. I think the bigger trends that we're just talking about there is, of course, the live local we've already seen, but the concept that I've been really studying is the 15-minute city. The idea that you have all your amenities around you, from education, healthcare, leisure, your workplace. And so that is the real thing that's benefiting, is quality of life. And I think everybody's welcoming that, and affordability, so you can have quality of life and be able to afford where you work and live. For me, it's now that vision of, instead of shopping centres and shops lining our streets in the local area, you have a choice of flexible workspaces to use and use near to home. Each operator, I think we've got such strong players like CoSpace here, we've got X and Y, Venture X and others. They all offer something different and a lifestyle choice. And I think this is where we'll see the rise of brands and people being able to find their sort of workplace that suits them and find like-minded people. So I think that's really exciting on how it's going to benefit the high street there.
Okay, and William, what benefits do you see it bringing the wider community, I suppose, as well?
Yeah, I'd absolutely agree. It's going to bring people back. It's one of the big things that councils have been trying to do for years in certain areas. You look at demographics as areas we look at where there's huge business parks that have just almost killed the high street because they've sucked people out. Now they're trying to get people back. So I think Zoe's right. I think you'll see a lot of lifestyle driven stuff. I think we'll see a lot of kind of more pop-up style restaurants, things like this, that will go in alongside office space that will complement. You'll have gyms that are starting to go into retail space. We're starting to see that as well. So the absolute 15-minute city thing is perfect because people just want it all the way around them. They want to go, okay, I'm going to drive in the morning. Everything's here. After work, I can go and do this. I can go and do this, and then go back and it's done. I think that will be a huge benefit moving forward, and I think the high street will be able to facilitate that and also enable it moving forward.
Right, and Will, anything further?
Yeah, I think there's a reduced reliance on retail. I think that's the key element of this. It's going to change the demographic and change how the high street is looked at. It's very much if you think about the demographic they're using the high street during and the shopping centres during the week, the demographic they use that above 50, above 60-year-olds that are using that space, and then at weekends that completely flips on its head. As the different demographic comes in. So I think it's going to change the footfall, it's going to change the use, it's going to change the demographic. And if it's done, as I keep going back, if it's done correctly, it's going to bring in more leisure, it's going to bring in more restaurant use because it's going to be used at lunchtimes as well as evenings, etc., etc. So I think it's just the ability to have workspace, but relevant in-demand workspace. And Zoe picked up an earlier, it can't just be, oh, we've built an office block and we're letting this traditionally. It has to be purpose-made, purpose-driven, and for the benefit of everybody that wants to use it. Yes, you're going to have different products across the high street that people don't want to use, and certain retailers people don't go into. You're going to have the same with workspaces, but if you can get a blend of that don't compete necessarily with each other, I think it's a really positive step to provide all different uses across the board.
Okay. William, you've touched on our next question, which was submitted by one of our audience already. So perhaps start with you on this one. In projects that you've been involved in, have the local councils been supportive of them?
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say they're unsupportive. That it's just a struggle to get their head around it sometimes, or it has been. I think we're starting to see traditional, we saw this pre-COVID, big companies would take 10-year leases on huge amounts of space. And that was typically the way. You could have a retail unit and give or take it would probably let. Post-COVID, we're now seeing this shift and it's kind of accelerated this kind of decline on the high street. And more starting to be receptive to it. We've got a deal that we're working on in Stevenage where the council are totally on board. They get it, they're pushing for it and they want it. In other areas, the councils are still a little bit unreceptive in terms of they're not sure what it'll look like, how it'll be facilitated, how it'll be delivered. So I think it varies per council district, but certainly since the use class changes and with the way the high street's going and the fact that flex seems to be spoken a lot more, a lot more people are talking about it. We've been forced to look at it more with the way that we're working now. It's definitely helped and it's certainly helping moving forward.
Yeah, I think people are just beginning to understand it more widely as well, aren't they? That is an option for them. Zoe, what's been your experience of council support?
Yes, I think your point that you just made, really, the education piece is huge, I think. Having set up the first business improvement district in the UK in Kingston upon Thames in sort of 2005 time, I know how, trying to move things forward is often an education game, working on shared objectives, bringing lots of different people together. I'm having so many discussions with councils and what they're seeking is more information on the market. They want to know the social impact, the economic benefits. They're really wanting to grasp what they need to be doing and that future looking. And I think some of it's unknown, but some of it actually giving them the support there is so much that's needed. I think there's a huge education piece that everybody's going through. Fabulous sort of team at the moment is located in Kent. I would say anybody who wants to open in Kent, they're a group that are really doing a lot. They have a monthly call with flexible operators that want to open in Kent and are really doing everything to bring providers in. So I think, like we were just talking about, you've got some much more proactive and some still trying to work out and navigate. But it's a journey that everybody's going on, but definitely the way forward.
Okay, and Will, and perhaps also, we've just had a question whether there are any examples where local authorities have successfully led on a town centre project. I don't know whether that's something you can pick up on or perhaps we can come back to with Zoe or William, but Will, in terms of the general question on council support.
Well, I think that there's a bigger picture as well. If you look at the town centres and cities now that are looking at these huge, large bids for multi-use, I think that's the key element here, is that councils have realised that it's not just down to them, or it doesn't have to be down to them to run the whole of these mixed-use schemes. They can bring in expertise through either one or many operators of space that they can then utilise the knowledge and the power that the bidder has, but also the power that the council has as well. So I think that's a key element of this, and I'm working on 2 or 3 of those at the moment, where there's an overarching bid policy going on there. And in terms of councils taking forward steps, I mean, the classic example is Stevenage that William's been talking about here, is that the council at the town centre of Stevenage hasn't been developed since the 1960s. And we're now seeing a huge, the Stevenage town centre Stevenage Borough Council have actually made the town centre a real destination point and have deliberately brought in flexible workspace operator in the form of CoSpace to take space on in there to add to their overall package.
Okay, Thank you. So the next question was a pre-submitted one from one of our audience. It's a bit longer, but I will read it out as some of the good points that hopefully you can pick up on. What innovative and new amenities or offerings are being created within the retail flex workspace solutions? And what challenges are there for high street or shopping centres to develop flex solutions that are different to those in traditional buildings? Zoe, start with you on that one.
Yes, I'm just thinking about that question and really turning it on its head in some ways, because I think you have to go back to your audience, their needs and the purpose of an office, or why they're going to an office now. So my big one is there's a scale really of convenience to destination. And so you've got different models within that. So if you're about convenience, you're very much about that primary catchment area. They want ease of access. They want value and speed of service, community and reliability factor. I think that's you're really about convenience. And so we're seeing in the rise there of well-connected suburbs, small towns and cities there. On the other end of the spectrum, you're not playing in that destination field. The destination area is much more, I would say, that hub model as opposed to express. I would say like 22 Bishopsgate is it's a hub, it's a destination. You're going to have wonder and wow factor because you're only going to go there, say, once a month for a branded showroom to take and woo your clients. So you're going to travel over an hour. So I think it's really understanding the amenities relevant to your audience. So with that scale, you could say you're somewhere in between convenience and destination, and say people are going to travel 30 minutes to get there. But you're going to be about innovation sort of and bringing different like-minded sectors together, or you're going to be sort of about tech, you're going to be rural, or you're going to be eco. You're going to have something about you that's going to draw people. So that's where it's understanding what amenities and who your target market is that's how you find placemaking and the right solution. But it always goes back to knowing who your market is. So that's when you work out the amenities that they want. Do they want media cast rooms to present to all their staff? Is it green rooms? Is it 3D printers? You've got to know your audience first before you find out what amenities you need to put in.
Okay. Thank you. And William?
Yeah, 100%. That's an absolutely key point. I mean, you look at the boosts in life sciences and in biotech and all these things. There's a lot of kind of incubation space being built for that purposefully. Will that move onto the high street? I don't know. Probably not. I think it ties in quite well with this kind of hub and spoke model, which is looking at not only what amenities people want, where are they actually coming from? If you were to go and build in the heart of, let's say, somewhere like Harrogate, what market is actually living in Harrogate city centre? Because it's great saying, well, look, we've got this walking distance from home, but are they actually commuting in 20 minutes? Where are they actually at? I use Manchester as a really good example because Manchester is quite a key area and it's heavily on our radar, which is centre of Manchester is very busy. It's very hard to get to, and there's some good operators in there. There's a lot of people travelling in from the outskirts, from kind of Bolton, Oldham, Salford, these areas that need some form of space around them instead of having to commute into the city every day. So I think it's looking at those units as well. I mentioned it before in terms of the viability, and it will come down to several factors, but the key ones will be well-being, and that will be tracked through the air quality, the HVAC, how good is the system that's been put in. Tired HVAC, we're already seeing that people are falling asleep in the afternoon because CO2 levels are too high. These are all actual facts and statistical data you can go and see. And natural light as well. Natural light is just so key, and that's one of the biggest challenges we have with looking at retail units. There's one that we're looking at, and we're actually pulling a skylight that was already existing. We're uncovering it and pulling it through the centre of the building just to get natural light in. So I think it's looking at, like Zoe said, looking at, okay, well, what do people want? But actually, what do people need moving forward? What's going to change in the next couple of years that you need to be aware of? There's no point fitting out an amazing building now if you've got to change it in 2 years' time.
Okay, thank you, and Will on that one.
Yes, I don't think there's a lot I can add to that, but I think the biggest challenge is it's not an office location. It's not a workspace location, the high street or shopping centre, and that's the biggest challenge, is that trying to get people to come and work in spaces that traditionally and still will have a demographic walking around them that is shopping and will look into in a goldfish bowl window and think, what's going on in there? So I think there's it's working in that retail environment is going to be one of the biggest challenges, but also one of the biggest challenges as well is actually getting those shopping centres and the high streets to really move forward themselves as well. It's pointless having all the placemaking and all the product and all the service, etc., if you are doing that in a standalone unit. If you're in there and you're inside, you'll be looking out onto a high street or a shopping centre that doesn't represent where you want to work. Being inside is fine, but I think that's one of the biggest challenges, is trying to bring everything forward and understand how the high street works, how the shopping centre works, how the owner and the council want them to work as well, and working with them to make them move forward. But I think, in terms of products, look, there's no end to it. But I think what we're seeing at the moment, for everything we're seeing at the moment with operators thinking on retail workspaces, there's a lot less private offices. There's more co-working. There appears to be a lot more amenity service, more drop-in facilities where people can utilise them on an ad hoc basis coming in from the shopping centre themselves. I think that will change to an extent once people understand how this works. But I think initially there's going to be some reticence. There's going to be some differentials in workstation prices. We're talking about, central office core locations against retail locations. There will be some differences there. But I think once it's understood and the products are understood, then I think that there's going to be there's a good opportunity for growth and different products coming out of that. What those are going to be, who knows? But we've seen some crazy stuff in the last few years, and I'm sure we'll see some equally ingenious stuff moving forward.
Well, just to add to that as well, I think that's absolutely key. I mean, I got introduced to this flex sector way before I even got into it by walking past an operator on the high street in London, seeing it and thinking it was a coffee shop, and walking in and falling in love. That's what kind of brought me into this sector. So, you look at what freelancers and these guys want. They want coffee shops that are well connected, that they can be around other people, but also don't have the noise constraints that a typical coffee shop does. So, on high street locations, it's your perfect opportunity for that. People are going to walk past, they're going to see it, they're going to want to be a part of it, and that can bring people in. And you move it quite aspirational in terms of the way that the products move once you're growing within a space. But definitely there's so much opportunity with that product. The product's totally changed. The suspended ceilings, carpet tile days, that they're moving away. And Will, you always kind of advise us on this, which is good. What the product is moving to is
wrong with blue carpet, white walls.
Yeah, brown carpet.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Thank you. So we've touched a bit on the hub and spoke model, which seems to be a sort of much discussed topic at the moment, with suburban office space complementing smaller city HQs. Is this sustainable longer term? Will, start with you on that one.
In 3 words, I hope so. I really do. I think it's something that we started seeing a bit of, and people started talking about it, and mostly tech companies started talking about the ability to work remotely. And in this country specifically, for the last 300 years, property owners, landlords have had complete control. If you're a tenant, you want space, you do it on my terms. We will let you space that we think that you want. Well, actually not what you want, but it's what we want to give you. And you will take that space, and we'll see you in 5 years' time to review, and then 10 years' time at the end of the lease, or 20 years' time. Bringing any sort of internet or fibre into the building has been a nightmare. They'd give you electricity and gas and heating, but they wouldn't bring you that. So there's been a big issue with owners stopping this. Now, not through any fault of their own, but this COVID experiment, as I keep referring to, has allowed people to work remotely, has shown how productive people can be remotely, or not in any case. I think there's going to be an issue of how do you train staff if they work remotely? How do you bring graduates through and people that are looking to start work if you're all working remotely? But I think that there's definitely going to be a drive towards people wanting to reduce their commute 2, 3, 4 days a week. When they go into towns, there's going to be a big opportunity for them to make it very proactive. They can do all their meetings back to back. They can see people in the evening, go for drinks, go for meals, whatever else it is. But it also means that people can be more productive at home, have the ability to utilize that town centre location, but also those corporates, especially corporates, can reduce their real estate footprint massively. If you look at somebody like David Solomons from Goldman Sachs, who called working from home an aberration. Probably a little harsh, but it's completely against what HSBC announced last week when they said 40% of their real estate would be cut. I think there's a big balancing act here to be done And it's not going to happen overnight, and it's not going to happen next year or the year after. A lot of corporates are going to have to understand how they can make this work for themselves. But if they can see a huge reduction in having a central London or central Manchester or central Birmingham operation, that you can reduce that down and allow employees to go and work elsewhere, I think, why wouldn't they? There is no reason why you wouldn't.
Thank you. And Zoe, what's your thoughts on the longevity of hub and spoke?
Well, I think sort of what Will Kinnear was alluding to is time is the commodity now. I think that's what's the big change. The fallout of COVID now, and in many ways, has been a catalyst to reevaluate the role of the office. Consumers want to split their time between home and office, meaning that the time spent in an office is much more collaboration, networking with colleagues, meeting clients. So the way we interact has changed, and I think we've just got to embrace this change. The providers evolving with this. I think that's the big one. And hub and spoke has been one of those ways that now teams have got to look at how they work operationally. Working from home, your productivity level really high, but the company productivity and what the company's sort of outputs are is sort of probably down because you haven't got those synergies. So you need to look at all those factors. I think instead of doing sort of outputs, you need to be thinking of the outcomes. That's where businesses are now starting to move to, going, if we want to be outcome driven, we've got to bring back the office. And I think that's where they've got to look at how they work. Is it core collaboration hours when they bring people together, core collaboration days, bring together people in the office? So there's a lot that individual businesses need to figure out what role the office plays for them as well in their business. So it's something that like the question was, hub and spoke, will it stay? Yes, in some form or other. I think it's going to keep on evolving and adapting, and different businesses have had different approaches. And so it's keeping close with the businesses now and evolving with them. Okay,
thank you, William. Any final thoughts from you on that topic?
Yeah, I'd absolutely agree with both, 100%. I definitely hope it's here to stay. I think what we're, we can speak from experience, what we're seeing, what the data is looking at as well, which is, people want to work near home in some kind of hub and spoke, whatever. A couple of days a week, they'll commute in, spend time meeting clients, like Zoe said, and actually being out, having meetings, collaborating with the team a couple of days a week. And I think that hybrid model will work. I think people will still work from home maybe 1 or 2 days a week when they need to just get admin stuff done. They just need to be purely focused and things like that. I think that will have its place. I think one of the other things that it does is it enables you to expand the talent pool as well. No longer do you have to hire within a 20 or 30 mile radius. You can go, well, we've got an office based here, we've got an office here. I can't remember which one, but there was one of the big 6 companies that pre-COVID was doing a deal to centralize their entire workforce into one office. And they're now saying we're going to spread that out. We're not going to do that anymore. We're going to have multiple office buildings. We can bring people in from different areas. They can work in different buildings in different locations. And it enables you to go, okay, well, we can hire anywhere now. We've got everything in place. You're not restricted to one location. And, do people want to go back to 5 a.m. alarms and commute in on busy trains? Probably not. So that's where I think this hub and spoke model will really benefit as well. To Will's point, I do think it's a bit too early to tell, and it will be a phased approach. We'll see some companies that will jump on it and adopt it from day one, others that will be a little bit more restricted and actually start to adopt it as we move forward.
Yeah, no, the world of work has definitely been very shaken up over the last year, and we're clearly just not at the point yet where we know how that's going to pan out longer term. Before I get to my final question, just to pick up on a couple of those that have been submitted. Will, I think this one's probably one for you. Has the thorny issue of valuations and the yield shift been considered on change of use to offices in retail?
I'm sure it has. It's going to be a big one on the basis of I think a lot of the the owners that I'm speaking to at the moment are taking a natural view that if retail is in decline, then how do we look elsewhere? How do we get some sort of use in it? How do we fill our spaces? So actually valuation is probably it's not the least of their concerns at the moment. It's about an income play. The last year has proved that, with some I know that some retailers and some shopping centre owners have been taking anywhere between 3 and 7% of income. So I think the valuation play will come into it. But I think at the moment there's still this overarching view that any income is good income, any operation, any use is a good use for space. And I think that these owners are already seeing, where we're talking about retail to office rents, for example, there's a huge drop. But because we aren't seeing that, we're not competing like for like with retail against retail. We're retail against office. So I think that there's going to be impacts on it. But at the moment, it doesn't seem to be too much of an issue.
Okay. Thank you. And then to pick up on another topic, how important is the provision of affordable parking, or will travel by public transport, cycling, etc., and environmental pressures change travel habits? William, is that something that you've any thoughts on?
Very, very, very location driven. You mentioned the Reading site earlier. That one of the other benefits of our Reading site is the ample amount of parking. It's part of a shopping centre, so there's huge amounts of parking. And in that area, there are people that cycle in, but the majority do drive. I think it's looking at what area you're going into. If you're in zones 1, zones 2, zones 3, if you're more central London, you probably don't need parking provision as much. If you're up north, if you're on the outskirts of Manchester, somewhere like that, you definitely do need parking, because people probably are going to drive in, unless there's a really good established bus route or tram route or cycle route. I think more and more people are starting to cycle. We're definitely seeing that. But I think that there is still that need for parking provision.
Yeah. Zoe, have you got any thoughts on that, how your transport to workspaces?
At the moment, I think you've got to look at this year as slightly different to next year. We're planning, because at the moment people aren't using public transport and avoiding public transport. So we've had an over-reliance on cars. I think just thinking next week's going to be interesting with schools going back and more people going into some workspaces. Already this week it's been really busy out and about on the road. So I think we're going to see some of these knock-on impacts. And then people, if it's hard to travel, are going to resort to different other travel mechanisms. Office Space in town have always done a good audit of how people travel into their workplaces. And I think it is looking at that, especially when you're opening up new locations, looking at all these options to make sure that you have got car parking is the biggest issue always with town centres. I think knowing with the Kingston Business Improvement District, they do a lot of work subsidising car parking for actual staff to be able to get into the retail staff to get into the town centres. So it is one of those stumbling blocks that you have to look at individual locations and work out with these things and actually think it through of how people are going to get to this office location in a town centre. And that brings back to all our conversations there with the council as well, and actually the forward thinking on that, because it is so crucial. That will make and break an office.
Yeah,
I could jump in just from the point of view of, there's two items here. If we are right and the hub and spoke model is the way forward, then actually you will be working, or majority of time will be working somewhere local to you. So actually transport is probably not going to be one of the major issues, walking, cycling, running, whatever else it is, skipping to get there. So parking may not be the issue, but also town centres historically have had incredible transport links. The town centre, what's been interesting is that the decline of the town centre hasn't been followed by transport moving elsewhere. The transport is still taking people into town centres. Public transport is. Look where the locations of bus stations are, and railway stations. So I think that there is going to be. I live rurally, so for me there is no public transport. I would have to cycle somewhere to get some public transport. But I think that if we look at it as a whole, actually, transport shouldn't be one of the major issues that these spaces have, because they are coming to the people as opposed to the people coming to them.
Yeah, no, there are obviously a huge range of needs that people have on depending on where they live and other circumstances. So I'm sure there will be a need for all sorts of transport availability. So moving to sort of a final question, looking ahead, how do you think that the pandemic will affect offices and retail premises over the course of the next 5 years? That's some real crystal ball things, but William, start with you on that final question.
Yeah, knock it over to me. I think we're definitely going to see the high street completely change. I think we're already starting to see that. Covenants that were worth their weight in gold pre-COVID, we're seeing aren't really worth that much now. So there's going to be a complete disruption, complete change, very lifestyle driven. In terms of office space, I think, given the press media and everything that's happening with Flex, it's really being brought into the spotlight. The amount that it makes up for the market share is still quite small, and we'll continue to see that market grow, and we hope to be a part of that market growth. But I think we'll certainly see people, especially bigger businesses, pushing more towards flexible, shorter term, that being maybe 2-3 year leases as opposed to 5 and 10 year leases. And the industry is going to be completely shook up. I do think there's elements that still today we're not going to see. We're going to sit here in 5 years' time and go, I don't think we saw that happening. There will be elements of that. But as a general rule, I think there's a lot of things that are happening that we can see and be a part of.
Great, thank you. And Zoe?
Yeah, I'm thinking about that and sort of that crystal ball thoughts there. If we look back in the past first before we go forward, actually with those town centres, a huge generalisation, back years ago, hundreds of years ago, the actual town centre was a place of workplaces with factories. And what really was the change there in the 1980s was retail really pushed out all the workplaces because of the high rents of retail and that sort of effect. So I think it's interesting now how we're going back to revitalising the town centres and bringing workplaces back into town centres. And so that's just how the fabric of a town centre evolves. I think the interesting one for me is used to move office really out of necessity, not choice. Now you can move quite easily. You haven't got those cubicle desks, a fixed line phone, or a massive clunky computer. You're quite agile and nimble. So that's the big one that's really good. You can change with minimal expense and effort. And so I think we've been used to that term hot desking, but I think we need to, as Will mentioned to me previously, Will Stokes, we need to get used to that term hot offices now, that you can move in and out of different office places. And I think within the town centre, people can move much easier, but still being able to stay in one town centre. So that's a big one that we're presently seeing. I think reading the FT at the weekend with Mark Dixon's comments, they really made me think. And he was talking about commuting is going to be something our grandparents did. And so that really resonated with me going, actually, yeah, if my son's sort of thinking that's something our grandparents did and it's, the way of the future now that commuting's gone, that will be, daily commuting and long commutes will be a thing of the past. That's the future where I see it and a great thing.
Okay, thank you. And finally, Will.
I think I mirror all that. I think we're going to see that in the short term. I think the interesting part about this is we're going to see some in city centres, especially with a lot of product available. And I'm talking flexible workspace product here. There's going to be a price squeeze as people come back in, and I think people are going to see how the different product. When we went through this in 2007, 2008, the last recession, and we still haven't hit a recession at the moment. The product that was available afterwards, and this is not being rude to any operators out there, wasn't very different between every single operator. Now there's a vast different amount of product out there, and I think people will be able to jump from operator to operator and understand, what am I getting for my money? What am I getting for my space? And offices, we talk about offices and we use the word offices, but if we speak to Zoe here, placemaking and spaces to places, we'll be working in places, not spaces, and it'll be somewhere people want to be. Providing service and hospitality is going to be absolutely key for people. And real estate, for most occupiers, they don't want it. They don't want that extra stress, that hassle. I'm a firm of solicitors. Why do I need to look after real estate? Can somebody else do that for me? And actually, if you're doing that, as one thing I allude to is that with owners is you can clean your own office space if you wanted to. You can go out with a brush and a hoover and clean your space, but you don't. You pay a cleaning company to go and do that on your behalf. That's what's going to happen in the future. Real estate will become something that's utilized as a place as opposed to a space. And I think that's where offices will and workspaces will evolve to. I think, alongside retail will be declining. We know that, moving online. But both retail and in the past, high-end product retail and low-end product retail have done really well. And I think that's could be the same thing for workspaces as well. if you're in the middle, providing nothing particularly amazing, you can have a market, but it's not necessarily going to be the market you have designed yourself for. If you're at high end or low end, I think you'll see a real disparity between products coming forward over the next 5 years, and it's exciting, really exciting.
Yeah, thank you. It's a really interesting sector to be in right now, and lots of thoughts on what might happen, and we don't really know, but I think there's certainly some good thoughts on what the next few months and years might hold. So thank you very much, William, Will and Zoe. I think that's been a really interesting discussion, and hopefully those watching have found it useful as well. Our next webinar will be towards the end of the month, and we're going to be looking at careers, HR and recruitment type issues. So please look out for the details of that, and we'll be sharing them on our website and other channels. So thank you very much, everyone. Have a good rest of the day. Goodbye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.